Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Jake Nelson, the General Manager of Emerging Products at LexisNexis. Jake, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here. There's so much going on when it comes to AI, and I think it's worth diving into one particular part here. The federal employees in these legal offices all across the federal government. Where do you see the low-hanging fruit for them to use generative AI tools? What are kind of the use cases that come to mind?
Yeah. I mean, you look at the life of an attorney, right? What the day-to-day looks like. And granted, it's different for different areas of law, right? Whether you're in litigation, you're an M&A attorney, you're working on transactions, there are a few consistent patterns, right? There's legal research, there's a lot of drafting, maybe some summarization. And so looking at integrating it first in those areas, right? In addition to maybe some of those areas that you've played around with operationally, right? In terms of adding it into your workflow. But really, the bulk of what attorneys are doing, right? Research, drafting, summarization, those are the things that we're trying to address with, Lexis plus AI, with Protege, with our legal AI tools. Just imagine being able to synthesize legal research. I remember when I first joined Lexis to build out their AI portfolio, and we'd always see on the left-hand side 10,000 plus results in different content areas. Well, I don't have time to read through 10,000 cases, and so being able to add that efficiency, especially within the government, is incredibly important. And so being able to synthesize, to summarize, to draft based on precedents that are really important, and being able to hone in on those precedents that you find are particularly useful is huge. And so being able to do that, I think, is probably where the lowest hanging fruit is.
Yeah, well, obviously agencies are thinking a lot about this. They're thinking about the opportunities, as you've mentioned, but also where to get started here, how to take those initial steps. So with that in mind, what are the things that you'd recommend to those agencies who are trying to get their feet wet on all things generative AI?
Start. I think that's number one. I think every genAI provider is offering some sort of trial or other type of offering where you can start to test and use these. Now, I know there's a lot of concern with actually inputting proprietary content or data, right, or information that you wouldn't want public, and so it's really important to pay attention to the terms and conditions with these providers, but. Starting is the first step, right? I would say, spending a day or two in a product like Lexis plus AI and to see what it can do from a research, a drafting, a summarization standpoint goes an extremely long way in actually making this useful for you. I mean, the reality is, I remember very early in 2022. Experimenting with the earliest generative AI models after building what's become one of our largest AI platforms at LexisNexis, and trying to draft full documents. And it just wasn't possible, right? I mean, or if it was possible, they were very, very, very short. And whenever you trace it back to anything of value, it wasn't an authoritative content source. And so now, when you start to engage with these, you're able to see just full documents, that vision that we had at the beginning, right, of transactional and litigation documents. And so, I think it's just really important. Dive in, start using it.
And to that point, dive in. Agencies, obviously, in the leadership, the supervisor positions, they're really trying to figure out the parameters of this, the guidelines, where agencies should get started on this and where maybe they should have some guardrails on, maybe hold up on this as far as use cases. What kind of guidance should agencies be giving their employees on what and what not to use these legal AI tools for?
Yeah, so even myself, right, there are a host of different AI models that I use, both general purpose and those that are specific to the legal profession and the practice of law. And I think there are certain more general tasks that you do that you wouldn't be putting in sensitive data or information into, right, where you could start using those to add operational efficiencies. But when it comes to actual legal I guess, AI providers, when you look at something like Alexis plus AI or Protege, right, like we just announced, what you'll see is that you can trust and you could put in content or sensitive information into that platform, because we've built it in a way where it's not going to feed back in to the model. We've partnered and we've built a private secure infrastructure so that when you put it in, it's not going to be found across town or by opposing counsel or by anyone else that you might be engaging with. And so understanding, engaging with, trialing, using products that have terms and conditions that you're comfortable with from a security standpoint is really important.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the top, this constant refrain in all things AI of garbage in, garbage out. As far as it pertains to this conversation about privacy and security and things of that nature, what can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So like I was describing just now, the key is that what you put in isn't going to just be fed back into the model to train for future iteration. There were some very early examples of individuals putting in information that was supposed to be proprietary and then it becoming surfaceable at another point, largely due to the fact that it's being put back into that model for training. So that cycle kind of continues to grow and improve. With our architecture and just due to the sensitivity of attorney-client information, both, you could think of it in the private sector, also in the government sector, you need to have that separation, right? So even, we've been very conservative in our approach and kind of moving forward and even kind of sharing those conversations, across, colleagues within the same agency or within the same firm, in private practice. That's due to the fact that we are making these conversations and that usage that you have to really be a standalone, a break off, something that is not being fed back into that model and being shared more broadly. And so, once again, just going back to your main question, right? Security, privacy, it all goes back to that relationship and that architecture you have around those models themselves. Even though the models are changing so rapidly and we're adding and have a multi-model approach, right? Maybe we've got one that's being used to search and retrieve that content that you need to enrich or improve that output. Maybe you've got a model that's being used to generate that first draft, but that follow-up in terms of validating citations to reduce and in most cases just eliminate hallucination. That is really the trick there, right? Is we have to pull in different models to validate one another in order to address those bigger problems, those bigger concerns with generative AI, hallucination being at the very top of that list.
Right. This is a lot of change management for the federal workforce more broadly, but it would probably be useful to dive into this a little bit more. How do you see these types of legal AI, gen AI tools augmenting and improving the work of federal employees?
Yeah. We, with the release of Protege at LexisNexis, a personalized assistant is what we're talking about oftentimes. But I think even going beyond that, right? Even just between, now and, the near term, I've heard numerous experts in this space and have seen it with my own eyes, right? It feels like 10 years of development is being squished down into 6-12 months, right? In terms of technological advancements. As we look at the growth of these models and as we start to experiment more and integrating them into just our daily lives, right? It's an assistant, and that's how it needs to be perceived. You're still in the driver's seat, and that's absolutely crucial. And so, if we have this larger vision and we're looking at and experimenting with these different models, we're experimenting with the capabilities. We're getting back into the seat. A great example of this is I just got back from Phoenix, and we saw these Waymos driving around, right? Those self-driving cars, and someone had shared their experience where they were they weren't too pleased with their initial ride the year before. someone had waved the Waymo on. There's no driver. It didn't pick up on the waving on. But now today, as I was driving in one just a couple days ago, I was incredibly impressed with the smoothness, its ability to pick up on different people. It's like the difference between a 16-year-old driver and a 17-year-old driver. There's a big difference, right? That difference that year made is huge. And it's the same thing with when you're looking at legal technology and legal AI and generative AI in the legal space. You can see the tremendous difference a year makes, right? Whether it's uploading documents and being able to synthesize more, being able to create a vault and kind of leverage this balance between legal content that, once again, individuals been coming to Lexis for years. With their content, it's massive to see the impact and the combination of those things together, and just the power and the future of what we'll be able to draft and accomplish from an efficiency standpoint.
And then just finally, because there has been so much exponential change in this space here, it's probably worth diving into this just a little bit further, leaving the tasks that are best suited for the AI and leaving the tasks that are best suited for those human employees.
Right.
Human in the loop is a phrase we hear time and again.
Right.
Could you maybe break down that loop of, what is the best thing for the employees to still work on, whether those higher value tasks that are still around and that they're being paid to do?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. In the end, we're in the driver's seat, right? As attorneys, I'm an attorney myself, right? And so I've been through that process, understand just, that pressure, right? That pressure, the knowledge or the concern, right? Number one question or customer problem we're trying to address as a company is that question of, am I going to miss something? We want that comfort, right? That we're going to be able to reduce that fear. I'm going to miss something. Now, AI is not perfect, right? We're on that, like you said, exponential curve of improvement, of growth. There will always be a space for legal professionals to fill that gap, right? But drafting, boilerplate language that's really largely the same in one draft to another is probably not the best use of time, right? I remember in law school when we would have to draft things from scratch to learn the process. And you get out to practice, and then the first thing you learn is, if I'm drafting from scratch, I'm doing something wrong. And so, in terms of efficiencies and where this really will come into play, and where, the role of the attorney, it's still understanding the gap. That's what we've always been here for, is to understand that gap. And so, while maybe you're using AI in the future to draft that initial draft, you're still ultimately responsible for what you're filing. And so that's why, when you balance like the use of a general AI tool, or you could think of an OpenAI, Anthropic, Claude model, very valuable, right? There are a lot of things that lawyers do that are, don't require legal content, right? A case, if I'm asking about getting together for an interview, I really don't think that I need to be citing to, a random case. But where that content is needed, that is so important. And so being able to validate those things and to be that piece of the loop as an attorney to say, yes, here, this content, or I could find this case, this isn't necessarily the most important or precedential case, or maybe the one that I want to cite. That is where an attorney is going to really be still adding that value. And so it's about efficiency, right? It's not about replacement. It's about being able to do more in less time, more effectively, serve more people better, right? We talk about the rule of law, we talk about access to justice. This is a huge opportunity for us in the legal profession. To be able to use these tools to do more efficiently, to do good with AI.
All right, well, Jake, some great points there. Thanks so much. Thanks again to today's guest, Jake Nelson, the General Manager of Emerging Products at LexisNexis. I'm Jory Heckman, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the AI and data exchange.